Currently in the UK, the second most common reason for failing your driving test is mirrors change direction. So this is changing the direction of the car without effectively checking that it's clear to do so. One of the most common occurrences where this actually happens is on roundabouts. As in the clip that's playing, the learner in front of me is using the left lane to go ahead, and they pull the car a little bit too far to the right, which is very common with learners, and that impedes my progress in the right hand lane to continue along the roundabout. So naturally, I swore at them, raised my fingers, and said, "Ah, what are you learners?" Or B, actually, I just had already anticipated this happening and carried on. As is very common, it is becoming a bit more common where people are getting this ability to now stagger themselves rather than get alongside someone at, for example, a roundabout. In this case, the learner would be marked on their driving test with a serious fault, very likely for mirrors change direction, but it could come under lane discipline. It could also be marked as just a steering fault where they have just steered too much to the right. It's really what the examiner feels is more appropriate at the time. In this video, I'm going to be looking at something that's very simple but very effective that will stop you doing this if you are finding that you're struggling to keep your lane discipline on roundabouts where the lanes are not painted. And I will be showing you a driving fault that one of my learners on test many years ago picked up, and the DVSA examiner told her that she essentially could use the same method I'm looking at now, which would have prevented her having these problems. If you haven't seen me before, my name's James. I'm a driving instructor in Norfolk. Any like and subscribe to the channel is greatly appreciated. The very simple aims of this channel is to help those that want to be helped, to promote lively debate, and to challenge some of the attitudes that we see today on the roads. Essentially, the big aim is zero road deaths. This channel's not going to achieve that on its own, but it's my way of feeling like I'm contributing towards that goal. So this video probably is aimed a little bit more at learners. I know I have a lot of very experienced drivers on my channel, but hopefully it can be still something that you enjoy. So all over the roads, you'll see lines on the floor when there is and when there is not paint, and these are called crown lines. They're very simply where we change the gradient of the road. So it's what the surface vehicles work to when they build a road, and it allows for changes in gradient, therefore drainage. On normal roads, these are usually in the middle. That is the highest point, and that's where the gradient changes. And if you think about why it's in the middle, it's so that we're not constantly driving along a crown line with a tyre. If you were constantly driving on a change of gradient, like the edge of my hand there, part of your tyre would become very worn and part of your tyre would not. So the crown lines are generally at places that you're not going to be consistently driving for long periods of time over. So just very basically, one roundabout in Norwich, I'm looking at the crown line that very easily identified in the middle of the exit slip road, and that is because you're about to come into two lanes. And if you see where the crown line then actually meets the road markings, it's very similar to the point where they actually start the official road markings. So all along that slip road, if you were treating that crown line as a lane marking and either keeping left or right of it, you're not going to go far wrong. So when I'm teaching a pretty new learner and there's no road markings, these crown lines can produce quite a nice way of the learner actually getting a visual stimulant of what they need to not cross and not drive on. So can they be used in a similar way on roundabouts? Well, I do. I have done all over the country. Now, before the You're Wrong Brigade get here, I am not telling you that these are official lane markings and you should use them as such. I am just giving you a bit of an insight into something that I do quite regularly, especially if I'm in areas that I don't know, and it helps me to keep focused on my lane discipline. I don't teach this to every learner. I would say more just the ones that are really struggling to keep their lane discipline. It can be useful to start pointing these out and help the learner to identify how to position correctly. So this first roundabout, just to give a few examples, this first roundabout now is quite a small one. It has two lanes on approach with no painted lanes on the circulatory carriageway, and I'm going ahead, so I'm using the left lane. Most learners will find keeping in the left lane very challenging, as per the learner earlier, but to have absolutely zero chance of accidentally going into the right hand lane, I'll keep to the left of the crown line. So smaller roundabouts will generally only have one crown line. And the same from the opposite way where the crown line is a little bit clearer. So again, it's not a lane marking, but a very useful aid. More experienced drivers among you, of course, are not really likely to need to do this. That was quite a small roundabout and it only had one crown line on it. So bigger roundabouts are going to often have both a primary and a subsidiary crown line. So this is now two crown lines on the roundabout. So this roundabout is also two lanes on the approach. There's no painted markings on the circulatory carriageway, but there is now two crown lines. So if I make sure I stay well away from the primary crown line, that's the one nearest the island in the middle, and actually use the subsidiary crown line as a guide and essentially drive over that, my wheels either side, there again is absolutely zero possibility that I can accidentally be in the right hand lane. Also in my area there is a roundabout with 3 lanes on the approach, and it's really important that you understand how many lanes there are on approach to a roundabout. That way you can keep in your lane correctly. But this roundabout, there's 3 lanes on the approach and 2 crown lines, so essentially that creates the 3 lanes as you go to move on to the roundabout. So as I'm going ahead in the left lane here, if I don't cross the first crown line, again, there is absolutely zero chance that I can have accidentally gone into lane 2. If I know there's nothing on my right, of course, I don't need to take such a tight line, if you like. I don't need to be as disciplined on my line. If on this roundabout I was using the middle lane to go ahead, so that really would be reserved for if I was maybe turning right at the next roundabout, I should go between the 2 crown lines and exit into the right-hand lane of the dual carriageway. But keeping between the 2 crown lines keeps me in an excellent position, and my priority should always be to be aware of other people. Do remember that I'm just offering you some advice. You don't have to take that advice. If you don't agree with it, you don't have to use it. And the most important thing is that you remain vigilant of other people. So don't be so focused on crown lines that you can't tell that someone else's lane discipline is lacking. Not too long ago, I was teaching one particular pupil in Bury St Edmunds, and there was one roundabout. She'd come from another instructor and had failed her test on this roundabout for not keeping in the left lane. I watched her do it, and yet she was using both lanes. I asked her to do it again, but making more of an effort to keep to the left, and on her own after 2 more goes, she still couldn't get it. So at that point, I just introduced the crown line. So I said, well, could you try something for me? And as you drive on this time, could you keep to the left of the crown line? And when we did it, this is not her driving, but this is the line she then took. And just simply by having that visual reference of I must keep to the left of that, that kept her in her lane. It can also be useful on semi-concentrically marked roundabouts, so that's where the markings appear and disappear at times. And again, if you use them as a rough guide, like in this video, as I lose the markings, I pick up the crown line, keep to the left of it, and that again brings me back when the markings reappear perfectly in position, no problem at all. But it is really important, again, as I said, that actually the most important thing you do is keep awareness of others. So in this clip here, the car next to me is in the wrong lane to go to my exit, and being aware of this is far more important than staring at the floor. So when I do this with learners, if we do agree that this is something that we're going to look at, we will usually make an agreement that I'll be looking around and keep them safe while they use these crown lines and get used to positioning. Now, to explain what happened with my learner on a test many years ago, she was going ahead third exit on this roundabout here, so she correctly positioned in the left lane. As she moved on, she did the line I'm about to do, and she kept really far over to the left. Technically, nothing she's doing wrong. She's in the left lane. But her position created confusion among people that probably do the roundabout every day. And as she came around to go to the third exit, a van behind had mistaken where she was going, thought she was going to take the second exit onto the dual carriageway like I do here. And very luckily for her, didn't cause her a problem. But the examiner said at the end, there are little lines in the floor and they can help you position better. And what he meant by that was this. So when I do this roundabout going ahead third exit, I know there's only one lane to my right. That lane has to go into the inside of the roundabout. And of course, if there's someone near me, I will be checking that they do this. But now I position much further over to the right, making sure I don't cross the crown line that is to my right, because that provides the right-hand lane essentially. And this now, as I come round, is much clearer that I'm not taking the second exit, I'm actually taking the third. So again, one of the most important things is being aware of how many lanes there are on the actual roundabout. So I will stress again that these are not official lane markings. But if we take the principle of how they're built on a normal road and just transfer this to a roundabout, it's nothing saying that we can't do this. If you are learning and you're struggling to keep in the left lane when going ahead, and this is a really common learner problem, have a little play with these lines. Get your instructor to keep you safe while you try and work out the correct position for yourself. Once you've got it, you've got it. As I said, it's something I use all up and down the country. I find it helps keep my focus and my interest more than anything on a roundabout is to look for these little lines. They show up really well in the wet, and I use them to help me position correctly. But do let me know if it helps. If you are learning, have you ever noticed them? If you are an experienced driver, do you think I'm chatting waffle? Is it something that you'd consider using? Most experienced drivers, of course, as I said, are probably not going to need to use these lines, but it is something, as I said, with me, it just helps me keep my focus and my interest in the drive, essentially, especially on longer drives and when I'm in areas that I'm not familiar with.